The raw skin of an animal is one of history's most stubborn mysteries. For thousands of years, across every continent, our ancestors faced the same urgent problem. A fresh hide will rot in days, becoming useless and foul. Yet from this inevitable decay, they crafted survival itself. They invented leather. This is a journey into the hidden alchemy of ancient tanning, where we will uncover 25 forgotten methods that built the ancient world. You will discover how civilizations from the frozen Arctic to the heart of the Sahara each unlocked a secret chemistry, using everything from tree bark and animal brains to substances you would never expect. We will see how a tanner's pit held the keys to empire, to exploration, and to art. How did the Vikings use the sea to tan their sails? What precious spice once perfumed the leather of emperors? By the end, you will see every piece of leather as a testament to human ingenuity, a puzzle solved against time. What does it truly mean to transform the perishable into something permanent? The solution to this ancient puzzle begins not with a tool, but with a startling biological fact. Every animal possesses within its own skull the precise ingredient needed to preserve its skin. This is the principle of brain tanning, a method so universal it echoes from the forests of ancient Europe to the plains of North America. The process is an intimate alchemy. After carefully removing and cleaning a hide, the tanner would emulsify the animal's own brain, often by simmering it in water, creating a creamy, nutrient-rich paste. This wasn't just a practical step, it was often a ritual, a respectful closing of the circle, using the creature's own essence to grant its skin a second, lasting life. The magic lies in the brain's composition, packed with natural oils and a substance called lecithin. When worked thoroughly into every fiber of the scraped hide, these compounds act as powerful surfactants. Imagine them as microscopic connectors, weaving themselves between the tough collagen strands, preventing them from sticking together as they dry. The result is buckskin, a leather renowned for its incredible softness, its warmth, and its unique ability to be washed without becoming stiff. But the process rarely ended there. To lock in this supple quality and achieve waterproofing, the brain-tanned hide was almost always given a final treatment: smoking. The hide would be sewn into a bag or tent shape, suspended over a slow, cool fire of rotten wood or certain barks. For hours, the gentle smoke would bathe the leather, depositing a layer of protective chemicals that repelled water. This combination created a material that was warm when wet, durable, and silent in motion, making it the ultimate survival textile for countless cultures. It is a testament to its perfection that today, modern bushcrafters and traditional leather workers still seek out this ancient method, finding in its steps a deep, almost forgotten connection between resource, process, and a truly extraordinary result. That final, smoky step reveals a deeper truth. Smoke tanning was far more than just a finish. It could stand alone as a complete and powerful preservation method in its own right. For many cultures, particularly in forested regions of North America and Northern Europe, the tanning pit was not filled with liquid, but with air, thick with the fragrant, chemical-laden smoke from a carefully tended fire. The process began with a hide that had been scraped clean and often softened with a preliminary treatment, like a brain or oil emulsion. This prepared hide was then sewn into a conical tent or a closed bag shape and suspended over a fire that was not allowed to flame. Instead, the tanner nurtured a smolder using specific rotten woods or barks that produced a cool, dense smoke. For hours, sometimes days, the hide would bathe in this vaporous chamber. The magic was in the chemistry of the smoke itself. As wood smolders, it releases complex compounds like creosote and phenols. These are powerful natural preservatives, the same substances that protect telephone poles and railroad ties from rot and insect attack. They seep deep into the leather's fibers, forming a protective barrier that repels water, discourages microbial growth and makes the material highly resistant to insects. The choice of fuel was a master tanner's secret, directly influencing the final product. Oak or maple smoke would impart rich, deep amber and brown tones along with a distinctive, earthy scent. Peat moss, used in places like the Scottish Highlands, could produce a leather with a unique, smoky aroma and a grayish hue. The result was a leather supremely suited to its environment. This wasn't just material for moccasins, it was the fabric of entire shelters. Smoke-tanned hides became the durable, waterproof coverings for teepees and wigwams, standing firm against driving rain and bitter wind. They formed airtight parfleches for storing food and belongings, and created garments that retained warmth even in damp conditions. The color and smell of the leather were not byproducts, they were the signature of the process itself, a direct imprint of the local landscape and the tanner's careful art. This method asks us to reconsider what tanning even is. It is not always a liquid process, but can be a transformation by air, by chemistry carried on a slow, patient wind. But smoke and brain were solutions for the individual, for the hunter or the small family group. For an empire to function, it needed leather on an industrial scale. This demand gave rise to the third method, the granddaddy of European leathercraft, bark tanning. Here, the alchemist was not a person but a tree. For over 2,000 years, from the workshops of ancient Rome to the bustling towns of the Middle Ages, tanners harnessed the hidden power within the bark of oak, chestnut, and hemlock trees. These barks are rich in astringent compounds called tannins, the same substances that make a sip of strong, unsweetened tea feel dry on your tongue. The process was a monumental exercise in patience. It began with the creation of a bark liquor, a dark, acidic brew made by steeping crushed bark in water. Then, in deep pits dug into the ground, the tanner would begin a slow, deliberate dance of chemistry. A fresh hide would be submerged in a weak solution, left for weeks to absorb the tannins. It would then be moved to a neighboring pit with a slightly stronger liquor, and then another and another, in a progression that could last for a year or more. This wasn't just soaking, it was a molecular transformation. The tannins traveled deep into the hide structure, forming permanent cross-links with the collagen proteins. Think of it as building a microscopic lattice within the leather, a rigid internal scaffolding that replaced the natural oils and fats. The result was a leather of profound character, firm, dense, and incredibly durable. It had a distinctive pale brown color that darkened beautifully with age and use. This was the leather that built the infrastructure of civilization. It was cut into straps for the harnesses of oxen that plowed fields. It was shaped into the rigid soles of boots for marching legions. It was tooled into the saddles for knights and the covers for priceless manuscripts, its stability protecting words for centuries. To support this immense process, entire landscapes were organized. Massive tanneries, often foul, smelling from the decaying organic matter, were banished to the downstream edges of towns. These were not simple workshops, but sprawling industrial complexes of pits, vats, and drying lofts, employing whole communities. The demand for bark was so immense it sparked its own forestry trade, with specific woodlands managed not for timber but for their precious peelable skin. Bark tanning created a leather that was less about personal survival and more about societal function. It was the material of authority, of law, of commerce, and of record, its very toughness a metaphor for the institutions it served. But what happened when a culture had no vast oak forests to strip? The search for preservation led to far more surprising and far more fragrant sources. The dense, dark leather of the tanner's pit was the material of labor and law. But for the scribe illuminating a sacred text or the noble preparing for a feast, a different kind of leather was required, one of luminous softness and delicate touch. This demand gave rise to a fourth method, a craft of dazzling whiteness and surprising fragility known as alum toying. This was not true tanning but a parallel art. Instead of the organic tannins from tree bark, the alchemists here used a crystalline mineral salt, alum, often mixed into a paste with other surprising household ingredients like egg yolks, wheat flour, and common salt. The process was a careful, almost finicky one, typically performed by a specialized guild of craftsmen known as whittoyers. They would work this creamy, unassuming paste thoroughly into a meticulously prepared skin, often from a kid goat or lamb, kneading it for hours to ensure the alum salts penetrated every fiber. The chemistry here is one of substitution and binding. The aluminum ions from the alum form temporary bonds with the collagen in the hide, coating and separating the fibers without creating the permanent, stable cross-links of a true tannin. The egg yolk and flour added suppleness and body, preventing the treated skin from becoming too brittle. The result was nothing short of alchemical. From a simple skin emerged a leather of remarkable character, snow white, incredibly soft, and as pliable as thick cloth. It had a fine, velvety surface called a suede finish that was a delight to the touch. This was the luxury material of the medieval and Renaissance worlds. It was cut and stitched into the finest gloves, a symbol of aristocratic status. It was stretched and tooled with gold to become the exquisite covers for priceless manuscripts and prayer books, its white surface providing a stunning backdrop for intricate designs. The demand for this leather created its own intricate economy. Alum was not a common mineral found everywhere. Major deposits in places like Italy, Anatolia, and later England became sources of immense wealth and geopolitical intrigue, with trade routes established solely to supply the whittoyers of Europe and the master bookbinders of the Islamic world. But this beautiful leather held a secret flaw, a critical weakness hidden within its very creation. Because the alum bonds were not permanent, alum-tored leather was highly susceptible to water. If it became thoroughly soaked and was then allowed to dry without careful reworking, a tragic reversal could occur. The salts could wash out, the temporary bonds would break, and the luxurious white glove or priceless bookbinding could literally revert back to a stiff, shrunken state of rawhide. This vulnerability meant that while bark-tanned leather could endure for centuries in a damp cellar, alum-tored masterpieces required a life of careful, sheltered preservation. It was beauty with an expiration date, a testament to an art that prioritized immediate splendor over eternal endurance. This delicate balance between splendor and fragility leads us to another method, one that sought permanence not from the earth's minerals, but from the very fats of life itself. That vulnerability of alum-tored leather, its fear of water, points directly to its opposite, a leather born not to repel moisture but to embrace it. This is the world of oil tanning, the ancient and greasy art that creates true chamois leather. Forget the synthetic yellow cloths you find in a car wash. The original material was something far more remarkable. Its story begins with the ancient Gauls, who mastered a process as physical as it was chemical. They started with a skin, typically from a deer, sheep, or the namesake alpine chamois goat, that had been dehaired and meticulously scraped. Then came the messy, transformative magic. The tanner would take pungent, oxidizing oils like cod liver oil or rendered neat's foot oil from cattle and work them into the damp hide with relentless physical force. This was not a gentle application, it was a brutal, full-body process called staking. The craftsman would stretch the oil-soaked skin over a blunt, angled beam and pull, rub, and work it back and forth for hours, driving the fat molecules deep into the very heart of the fibers. The chemistry here is a slow burn. As the oils are mechanically forced in and exposed to air, they begin to oxidize and polymerize. Think of them slowly curing, like a thick layer of linseed oil on a painter's canvas, turning from a liquid into a solid network within the leather's structure. This creates a material with almost paradoxical qualities. True chamois leather is incredibly soft and pliable, yet strong. It is famously absorbent, capable of holding many times its weight in water without feeling wet, and it can be wrung out and used again and again without stiffening. This made it the ultimate utility leather of the ancient and medieval worlds. In Roman bathhouses, it was the preferred cloth for drying the body, gentle on the skin and highly effective. In Renaissance workshops, artisans used it for polishing fine glass and precious metals, as its open, oily structure could hold polishing compounds without scratching. It was used as a filter for fine wines and oils, and even found its way into the helmets of divers, acting as a seal. The name chamois became synonymous with the process, not the animal, a testament to how the method defined the product. While the alpine goat provided the original canvas, any suitable skin subjected to this rigorous, oily baptism could emerge as this supremely useful, thirsty leather. It was a material defined by its relationship with liquids, a perfect partner for water in a way that the beautiful, fearful alum-tawed leather could never be. But if oil tanning was a partnership with fat, what happened when a culture turned to a far more elemental force, one that could both preserve and poison? The greasy, physical art of oil tanning required immense labor, but for the massive tanneries of the ancient world, scale demanded a more readily available, if less fragrant, resource. The sixth method turns to a substance so common it was literally considered waste, yet it became the lifeblood of the leather industry for millennia. This is the story of urine tanning. Before a hide could ever meet tannins or oils, it had to be stripped clean of hair, fat, and bits of flesh clinging to its underside. This foul and difficult process, known as liming, found its most potent assistant in the ammonia-rich power of stale human urine. In cities from ancient Rome to medieval London, this was not a matter of individual effort but of organized commerce. Public collection points, often just large pots placed on street corners, served as communal repositories. These vessels were regularly emptied by collectors who sold the valuable liquid directly to tanneries and to the fulleries, the workshops that cleaned and thickened woolen cloth. The social contract was clear: one person's waste was another's essential raw material. The chemistry is straightforward but effective. As urine ages, the urea within it breaks down into ammonia, creating a strongly alkaline solution. When hides were soaked in these vats, the ammonia gently loosened the bonds between the hair follicles and the skin itself, making the tedious job of deharing immeasurably easier. It also helped to swell and open up the hide's fibers, preparing them to better absorb whatever tanning agent came next. But in some cultures, urine's role did not end with mere preparation. In certain traditions, particularly in colder regions where vegetable tannins were scarce, a prolonged soak in fermented urine could serve as the primary preservation method itself. The ammonia, along with the salts present in the urine, would alter the hide's pH and create an environment hostile to the bacteria that cause rot. The resulting leather was often stiff and carried, unsurprisingly, a persistent odor, but it was functional and durable. The economic footprint of this practice was vast. Guild regulations often specified the acceptable strength or age of urine to be used, and tampering with or diluting a batch was considered a serious fraud. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder even noted the superior quality of urine collected from public latrines, as its potency increased with time and volume. This created an entire shadow economy where the contents of a city's chamber pots were not flushed away but carefully gathered, traded, and poured into the tanning pits that supplied the sandals for its soldiers and the aprons for its blacksmiths. It is a stark reminder that in the pre-industrial world, very little was truly wasted. The line between a public nuisance and a precious commodity was drawn not by morality but by chemistry and commerce. Yet, for all its utility, this method was fundamentally a process of subtraction, of stripping away. What happened when the goal was not to remove, but to add something spectacular, to transform leather into a canvas for light itself? The lingering scent of the tannery vat was a sign of industry, but it was also a problem. For cultures that prized not just durability but also a specific, supple softness in their leather, another organic solution was waiting, one that pushed the boundaries of resourcefulness even further. This is the world of dung tanning. If the use of urine seems unappealing, this method requires a deeper breath. In regions from the Indian subcontinent to parts of Africa, tanners harnessed the surprising enzymatic power of animal dung, often from dogs or pigeons, to perform a crucial step known as baiting. After a hide had been limed and dehared, it was often left too stiff and swollen, its fibers too tight. To create the soft, pliable leather desired for fine work, it needed to be relaxed. This is where the dung paste came in. The selected dung was mixed with water into a thick slurry and either painted onto the hides or the hides were soaked in it. Far from being a simple matter of filth, this was precise biochemistry. The digestive enzymes present in the dung, particularly from grain-eating birds or omnivorous dogs, acted as gentle biological agents. They broke down specific proteins and elastin still clinging to the collagen fibers, softening the hide and giving it a desirable, fine grain. The tanners who practiced this were masters of controlled decay, walking a razor's edge between softening and destruction. They developed an intimate sensory knowledge of the process, knowing precisely how long to leave a skin in the dung bath by its smell, its feel, and its appearance. A few hours too long, and the valuable hide could be reduced to a useless, gelatinous mass. To manage the obvious health risks, these craftsmen often worked in dedicated, open-air spaces, used specific types of fresh dung considered most effective, and followed rigorous washing regimes after the baiting was complete. The leather that emerged from this unlikely process was not for everyday harnesses or hard soles. It was specialty material. In India, this method was traditionally used to produce the incredibly soft, resonant leather for the heads of classical drums like the tabla and mridangam, where the acoustic properties were paramount. In some African traditions, similarly treated hides became luxurious garments for ceremonial wear, prized for their drape and comfort. This practice forces us to expand our definition of useful materials. It shows a profound understanding that within what we discard lies potent chemical activity, waiting to be directed by human ingenuity. The tanner did not see waste, they saw a catalyst, a biological tool as specific and necessary as any metal scraper. But what if the goal was not softness but the ultimate protection, a leather so resistant it could turn a blade? That biological tool of dung required immediate use, for a fresh hide waits for no one. But what if you needed to buy time to transport a valuable skin across a desert or over an ocean before it could ever reach the tanner's hands? This universal challenge brings us to the eighth method, a foundational process that underpinned the entire ancient leather trade, salt curing. Before the alchemy of tanning could even be contemplated, the raw hide had to survive its own journey. Salt curing was the ancient world's pause button on decay. A technique so vital it was practiced from the banks of the Nile to the workshops of the Han dynasty. The principle is one of simple, brutal dehydration. By packing a fresh, scraped hide in a thick layer of dry salt or submerging it in a concentrated brine, the tanner exploited a fundamental force of nature, osmosis. The salt outside the hide is far denser than the moisture inside the cells. In a desperate attempt to balance this concentration, water is violently pulled out of the skin's tissues and into the salt. The hide becomes a stiff, board-like sheet, its internal moisture content plummeting. In this parched state, the bacteria that cause rot and putrefaction simply cannot survive. They are either desiccated outright or rendered completely inactive. This process, often called corning, transformed a perishable commodity into a stable one. A salt-cured hide could be folded, stacked in bales, and stored for months, even years, before being rehydrated and tanned at its final destination. This simple act of preservation created entire economies. The demand for salt for leather curing was immense, fueling trade routes that stretched across continents. Inland civilizations prized rock salt mined from ancient deposits like those at Hallstatt in Austria, while coastal cultures evaporated sea salt in vast pans. The quality and type of salt mattered, with purer salts leaving a cleaner hide ready for fine work. The archaeological record is dotted with the evidence of this practice. In the holds of ancient Mediterranean shipwrecks, archaeologists have found the telltale remnants of bales of hides alongside containers of salt. In storage pits near ancient Celtic settlements, layers of salt and preserved animal skins speak to a well-organized preparation for the long winter or for trade. Salt curing was the unsung hero of the leather world, the critical first step that made everything else possible. It allowed a hunter on the steppes of Central Asia to sell his catch to a tanner in a distant city. It enabled an empire to centralize its leather production, shipping raw materials from its frontiers to its industrial heartland. Without this ability to halt time with salt, the complex global trade in leather that clothed armies and shod civilizations could never have existed. It was a humble beginning, a preservation born of necessity, but it set the stage for transformations far more visually dramatic. Salt gave the tanner time, but the sun offered an even more direct path. In the world's arid landscapes where the air itself seems to drink moisture, the ninth method emerged from pure necessity: sun drying and mechanical working. Picture a raw sealskin stretched tight on a wooden frame under the relentless Arctic sky, or a bison hide pegged out on the vast, dry plains. The sun and wind would do the initial work, rapidly desiccating the skin, wicking away the water that bacteria needed to thrive. But this created a new problem. The result was not leather, it was rawhide, a material as hard as a board and just as inflexible. It could be used for drumheads, for shields, or for sturdy containers, but it was useless for clothing or soft bags. The true transformation, the magic that turned this stiff sheet into supple, wearable leather, came not from a chemical vat, but from human hands, teeth, and relentless grinding effort. This was the domain of physical alchemy. Once dried, the hide had to be worked and worked and worked again. It was scraped over a blunt beam with a bone or stone tool, pulled, twisted, and pounded with stones. In some cultures, a crucial step involved chewing the hide. This wasn't a whimsical act, it was precise, tiring labor. The enzymes in human saliva, combined with the warmth and moisture of the mouth, would gently break down specific fibers in small, manageable sections, softening them before the hide was stretched further. The physical action of all this work did something profound on a microscopic level. It broke the rigid, cross-linked collagen fibers that had tightened during drying, separating them and allowing them to slide against one another. Think of it as untangling a massive, dried-out knot, fiber by fiber, through sheer force and repetition. The role of women as the primary experts in this art across many indigenous cultures, from the Inuit to the tribes of the Great Plains, cannot be overstated. They were the engineers of softness. A plainswoman might spend days on a single bison hide, moving through a meticulous sequence, scraping fat and flesh, applying a brain or liver emulsion, smoking the hide, and finally, the endless softening work, often done in a social circle with other women. The value of the finished product was a direct measure of her skill and endurance. The leather that emerged from this sun-born, hand-wrought process was a testament to human energy. Every soft moccasin, every warm pair of leggings represented hours, sometimes weeks, of concentrated labor. There were no shortcuts, no industrial vats to do the work. The softness was earned, literally beaten into existence. This method strips the concept of tanning down to its most elemental components: air, muscle, and time. It asks us to feel the ache in the arms of the person who made it, and to understand that the comfort of ancient clothing was never a given. It was a hard-won victory. The sun and wind of the plains created a leather of intimate labor, but along the storm-lashed coasts of the world, tanners faced a different, salt-soaked challenge. Their solution was pulled from the cold, dark waters in the form of glistening fish livers. This is fish oil tanning, a marine method that turned the bounty of the sea into a shield against it. For communities from the fjords of Scandinavia to the islands of Japan, the logic was beautifully direct. If you needed leather to survive the ocean, you used the ocean itself to make it. The process began with the careful rendering of oil, often from the livers of cod, herring, or shark. These oils are uniquely rich in long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. The tanner would boil the oil to purify it, then work it thoroughly into prepared sealskins or cattle hides, using a similar strenuous staking process as with other oil tanning. But here, the marine chemistry took over. When exposed to air, these fish oils don't just dry, they undergo a powerful polymerization. Imagine them not just soaking in, but weaving themselves into a solid, plastic-like network within the leather's very fibers. This created a material with almost legendary water resistance. The leather became supple yet incredibly tough, and it repelled salt water with a greasy, enduring shrug. For the Vikings, this wasn't a luxury, it was a technology of conquest and exploration. Fish oil-tanned leather was used to reinforce the seams and edges of their iconic square sails, the very fabric of their mobility, protecting the vital wool or linen from chafing and spray. It was fashioned into the durable outerwear for fishermen, into pouches that could float, and into rigging components that needed to stay flexible in freezing spray. This leather had a signature, a pervasive, briny odor that never fully faded, marking its wearer as a man of the sea as clearly as any tattoo, but its value traveled far beyond the coast. Inland, where such oily, waterproof leather was a rarity, fish oil-tanned goods became prized trade items. A pouch made from this material was a reliable container for precious salt or dry goods in a damp climate, and a jerkin of it could mean the difference between life and death for a messenger caught in a days-long storm. The method speaks to a profound environmental adaptation, where the harsh demands of the maritime world forged a leather as relentless and enduring as the sea it was designed to defy. The fish oil of the Vikings created a leather that smelled of the open ocean, but in the vast grassy steppes of Central Asia, another pastoral product offered a gentler chemistry. For the nomadic herders who lived and died by their flocks, the solution to preserving leather came not from the hunt or the sea, but from the daily sustenance of their animals' soured milk. This is lactose tanning, a method born of necessity and profound resourcefulness. In a culture where every part of an animal was utilized, it was a logical step to use the byproducts of dairy to preserve the skins. The process was deceptively simple. After a hide was scraped clean, it would be submerged in a large container, often a leather bag or a wooden vat, filled with fermented milk, whey, or kumis, which is fermented mare's milk. The key agent was lactic acid, produced naturally as the milk soured. This mild acid acted as a gentle tanning agent, slowly penetrating the hide over weeks or even months of soaking. The choice of milk was a direct reflection of the herder's life. A culture that prized horses like the Mongols would use abundant mare's milk, goat herders used goat's milk, and cattle herders used cow's milk. Each imparted slightly different qualities, but the principle remained the same, a closed loop of pastoral life where the animal provided both the canvas and the preservative. The leather that emerged from this milky bath was distinctive. It was not the butter-soft buckskin of brain tanning, nor the rock-hard durability of bark tanning. Instead, it had a firm, slightly stiff hand, yet it was remarkably strong and resistant to wear. This made it perfect for the specific needs of nomadic life. It was cut and stitched into sturdy bags for transporting goods on horseback, into durable covers for yurts that could withstand the abrasive wind, and into functional, hard-wearing clothing. The process itself was perfectly suited to a mobile existence. The long, slow soak required no constant attention, allowing the herders to tend to their flocks while the chemistry worked in the background. When the time was right, the hide would be pulled out, washed, and worked to a supple finish. This method speaks to an intimate, almost symbiotic relationship with livestock. The horse gave its skin for a saddle, and its milk helped to tan the leather for the straps that would hold that saddle together. It was a sustainable cycle with no part wasted, and it produced a leather that carried the subtle, tangy scent of the dairy that created it, a scent that would have been as familiar on the steppe as the smell of grass and smoke. The pastoral simplicity of milk tanning created a leather steeped in the rhythms of daily life. Yet in the refined courts and scholarly studios of ancient East Asia, tanners turned to a substance that embodied both ceremony and utility, tea. While the mighty oak forests of Europe supplied bark for industrial-scale tanning, East Asian artisans often worked on a smaller, more precise scale, crafting leather for the scholar's table and the artist's toolkit. Here, the coarse, leftover leaves from tea processing, or even the dust swept from the floor of a tea shop, found a second life as a tanning agent. These older leaves, too bitter for drinking, were still packed with natural astringents, the same tannins that give a strong brew its dry character. The tanner would create a potent liquor by steeping these leaves in hot water, then submerge a prepared hide in the cooled solution. The process was gentle and slow, a far cry from the year-long pits of European tanneries. The tea tannins worked their way into the leather, providing a moderate level of preservation. The resulting material was not intended for heavy saddles or marching boots. Its strength was suited for a different purpose. The most immediate gift of the tea bath was its color. The liquor imparted a soft, warm, light brown hue, often with subtle reddish or yellowish undertones reminiscent of the tea itself. This was not a leather to be dyed. It came pre-colored by its making, bearing the natural, elegant stain of the leaf. This made it perfect for the world of scholars and aesthetes. In China and Japan, tea-tanned leather would have been carefully cut and stitched to create protective covers for precious scrolls and bound books, its color harmonizing with the dark ink and rich paper. It formed delicate pouches for holding seals, brushes, or pigments, items where a harsh, oily leather would be inappropriate. One can easily imagine it used for the protective wrappings of a musical instrument like a pipa or a biwa, or as decorative panels on a lacquerware box. Its use speaks to a philosophy of resourcefulness that saw value in every part of a process, where the waste from one esteemed craft became the foundation of another. It is likely that tea tanning was rarely used in isolation, but as a preliminary step or in combination with other local methods, perhaps a follow-up smoke treatment for fragrance or a light oiling for suppleness. This method transforms our understanding of the tanner's workshop, from a place of overwhelming smells and industrial vats to a quiet studio where the scent of tannin might mingle with the aroma of ink and sandalwood, and where the preservation of knowledge began with the humble tea leaf. That quiet artistry of the tea leaf reveals a universal truth: the tanner's workshop was a laboratory of local abundance. In the damp, cool climates of medieval Europe, where barley fields stretched to the horizon, another common beverage offered its own subtle chemistry to the craft. Tanners in towns and monasteries sometimes turned to stale beer or ale, not as a primary tanning agent, but as a clever assistant in the softening stage known as baiting. After the harsh liming process left hides stiff and swollen, they needed to be relaxed and made supple. A vat of old, flat beer provided a surprisingly effective medium. The mild lactic acidity present in soured beer helped to neutralize the alkaline lime residue, while the residual sugars and yeasts could foster a gentle fermentation that further broke down unwanted proteins. It was a controlled, biological softening, far milder than the enzymatic punch of dung, but effective for certain types of leather. The logic was beautifully pragmatic. In a world where spoilage was a constant threat, using beer that had passed its prime for drinking was an act of resourceful economy. This practice finds its strongest evidence in the integrated economies of medieval monasteries. These self-sufficient communities often operated both breweries and tanneries within their walls. The monastic brewery produced ale for the brothers and for sale, while the tannery processed leather for book bindings, vestments, and harnesses for the abbey's farm. It is easy to envision a brother tasked with both duties, carrying a bucket of yesterday's unsold ale from the brewhouse directly to the tannery next door, turning a potential loss into a productive step in a sacred craft. There is also intriguing speculation about the role of hops, which began to be widely used in brewing during the later medieval period. Hops are a natural preservative, and their bitter acids possess mild antibacterial properties. While the primary goal was to soften the hide, the hop compounds in an aged ale might have offered a secondary, subtle preservative effect, helping to stabilize the leather during this vulnerable phase. This method was never about creating a distinct type of leather like chamois or buckskin. Instead, it was about refinement and problem solving within an existing process. It speaks to the tanner's intimate, almost intuitive understanding of organic chemistry long before the science had a name. They observed that a sour liquid could reverse the effects of an alkaline one. They understood that fermentation, guided by human hands, could transform material. Beer tanning stands as a testament to the experimental spirit woven into daily survival, where every available substance was a potential tool, and even a spoiled drink could find purpose in the patient art of preservation. The quiet monastic brewery and its sour ale show how tanners used whatever was at hand. But in the very earth beneath their feet, other civilizations discovered a different kind of pigment and preservative. This is the world of clay and mineral tanning, where the soil itself became an agent of transformation. Long before the refined alum crystals of the Witoya, people across the globe were using the most basic of materials, mud. Not just any mud, but specific clays rich in aluminum salts or iron-rich ochres pulled from riverbanks and cliffs. The process was straightforward. A prepared hide might be buried in a pit of this special, moist clay for weeks, or thick pastes of the mineral-rich earth would be plastered directly onto the skin's surface. The chemistry here echoes the alum toying of later centuries, but in a raw, elemental form. The aluminum ions in the clay would bind with the hide's collagen, creating a fragile, temporary preservation. Iron oxides from red or yellow ochres would stain the leather deeply while offering some mild antibacterial properties from the acidic nature of the soil. On its own, this method rarely created a durable, flexible leather. A hide tanned solely in clay would likely remain stiff and could eventually revert if washed thoroughly. So why do it? The answer lies in color and ceremony. For many ancient peoples, leather was not just functional, it was a canvas. The vibrant red of iron oxide, the stark white of kaolin clay, or the deep yellow of ochre were colors of power, status, and spiritual significance. Archaeological finds provide stunning clues. In arid regions of the Americas and Central Asia, researchers have discovered ancient leather artifacts still bearing vivid mineral stains. A fragment of a shield might carry the deep red handprint of its maker, applied in ochre mud. Remnants of a ceremonial pouch could show geometric patterns in white clay, designs that would have been impossible with later dyeing techniques. This suggests that the mineral treatment was often the first step, a way to permanently stain the hide with sacred symbols or tribal markings before it underwent a more thorough preservation with smoke or brains. The clay fixed the color into the very fibers. Think of it as prehistoric screen printing, using the earth as ink. This practice transforms our understanding of early leatherworking. It wasn't merely a technical craft aimed at preventing rot, it was an artistic one from its very inception. The tanner was also a painter, and the tanning pit could also be a palette. Choosing a specific red clay from a particular sacred site added meaning to the object being made. A warrior's armor stained with the red earth of a battleground carried its own story. A shaman's regalia marked with white clay from a holy spring held spiritual power. Mineral tanning speaks to a desire that goes beyond pure utility. It reveals that our ancestors sought not just to preserve the skin, but to adorn it, to connect it to the land, and to imbue it with identity. The leather became a map of both geography and belief, colored by the very ground from which the people drew their life. The vibrant colors of earth pigments were a form of early artistry, but the natural world offered another, more volatile source of preservation. High in the mountains and deep in the forests, a tiny, biting insect held the secret to a powerful tanning chemistry. This is the story of formic acid tanning, where the tanner's ally was not a tree or a mineral but an ant. Some indigenous cultures of the Americas discovered that the very creatures which could deliver a painful sting were also capable of curing a hide. The process was as direct as it was ingenious. A tanner might deliberately place a scraped deer or elk skin near a large, active nest of wood ants or carpenter ants, species known for their aggressive defense and potent chemical arsenal. Alternatively, they would collect the ants themselves, crushing them into a paste or creating a brew by steeping them in water. This liquid or paste was then worked into the hide. The active agent was formic acid, the same compound that gives ant stings and bee stings their burning sensation. For the insect, it is a weapon. For the tanner, it became a tool. Scientifically, the acidic environment created by the formic acid served a dual purpose. First, it lowered the pH of the hide, creating conditions hostile to the bacteria that cause rot. Second, like the tannins from bark or the alum from clay, the acid molecules began to interact with the collagen proteins in the skin, forming weak bonds that stabilized the material. The result was a leather that was preserved, though often quite stiff unless followed by extensive softening work. Early European explorers and ethnographers recorded their astonishment at this method. They wrote of seeing hides pegged out over anthills, left for the insects to crawl over and cover with their acidic secretions. One can imagine the scene, the hide alive with a moving, seething blanket of workers, each one unknowingly contributing its minute chemical dose to the transformation. The tanner would return later, brush off the ants, and assess the work. This practice required a deep, localized knowledge of entomology. Not just any ant would do. It was typically the larger, more robust species, like the Allegheny mound ant or certain carpenter ants, whose formic acid production was significant enough to have a measurable effect. Using a nest of tiny, less potent ants would be futile. This method stands as a brilliant example of biomimicry and acute observation. Someone, long ago, noticed that animal remains near certain ant nests seem to resist decay differently. They connected the painful sting of the insect with a potential preservative power, and then had the courage to experiment, to invite a swarm of biters onto a valuable hide. It represents a dialogue with the ecosystem at its most intimate and daring level, where a nuisance was transformed into a resource through sheer creative understanding. The intimate dialogue with an anthill demonstrates a profound truth that every ecosystem holds its own chemical library. In the vast, silent boreal forests that circle the globe's northern latitudes, where mighty oak trees give way to endless conifers, the tanner's search for preservatives moved from the ground to the trees themselves, not for bark but for the strange, symbiotic life growing upon them. This is fungal or lichen tanning, a method born from the quiet observation of the forest's slow decay. In regions like Siberia, Scandinavia, and the northern reaches of Canada, where traditional bark tannins were scarce, indigenous peoples like the Sami turned to the lush, gray-green lichens draping the spruce and pine branches and to the tough, shelf-like fungi clinging to deadfall. One of the most valued was the species often called old man's beard, a stringy, pale lichen that hangs from branches like a ghostly curtain. Another was the leathery, hoof-shaped tinder fungus, a hard mushroom that grows on birch trees. These were not random choices. They were selected because they resisted rot themselves, a clue that they contained powerful defensive chemistry. The process was a gentle extraction. Gatherers would carefully harvest these organisms, avoiding over-harvesting from a single tree to ensure regrowth. They would then boil them in water for hours, creating a potent, often bitter-smelling tanning liquor. The magic lay in specific compounds like usnic acid, found abundantly in lichens like old man's beard. Usnic acid is a remarkable natural substance, a potent antibiotic and antifungal agent. For the lichen, it's a shield against microbial attack in the damp forest. For the tanner, it became a tool. When a prepared reindeer or elk hide was soaked in this fungal brew, the usnic acid and other compounds seeped into the skin, creating an environment that was actively hostile to the bacteria that caused decay. It wasn't a true tanning in the strict chemical sense of forming permanent cross-links like oak tannins do. Instead, it was a powerful preservation through poisoning, saturating the leather with its own natural biocide. The resulting leather was functional and durable, perfectly suited to the needs of life in the taiga. The Sami and other northern groups would use it for items like sturdy pouches, straps for sledges, and patches for clothing and shelter. The leather often took on subtle hues from the brew, perhaps a faint greenish or yellowish tint from the lichens, a natural dye job from the preserving agent itself. This method speaks to a different kind of environmental intimacy. It required knowledge not just of animals but of botany and mycology. It demanded an understanding of which fungi were safe to handle, which produced the strongest liquor, and which trees hosted the best specimens. The tanner had to be a forager, a naturalist, and a chemist all at once. Using old man's beard or tinder fungus was a sustainable adaptation, a way to utilize a renewable resource that the forest offered in abundance without felling a single tree. It represents a brilliant pivot, a solution crafted not from what was missing, but from what was uniquely and abundantly present. The forest, which at first glance seemed to lack the classic tools of the tanner, revealed its own hidden vats, simmering not in pits but in the quiet, slow life clinging to its bark. The fungal brews of the northern forests relied on slow, patient extraction, but in the vibrant tropics, tanners found a preservative that flowed freely, almost as if gifted by the trees themselves. Palm wine tanning harnessed a substance central to celebration and daily life, turning a festive drink into a tool of the trade. Across West Africa and Southeast Asia, where coconut and oil palm trees thrive, people tap the sweet sap, allowing it to ferment naturally into a mildly alcoholic, tangy beverage. Somewhere, a curious or resourceful artisan made a crucial connection, noticing that this same liquid, when left to sour further, possessed a sharp acidity that could alter the nature of a hide. The process was elegantly straightforward. A tanner would take a prepared goatskin or cattle hide and submerge it in a vat of this fermented palm sap, or perhaps work the liquid thoroughly into the fibers. The chemistry here is a gentle 1-2 punch. The natural lactic and acetic acids produced during fermentation lower the hide's pH, creating an environment that slows bacterial decay. Meanwhile, the small amounts of alcohol act as a mild solvent, helping to carry these acids deeper into the material and offering its own slight preservative effect. This wasn't a method for creating rock-hard sole leather, but for producing a workable, durable material perfectly suited to the local climate and needs. The leather that emerged from the palm wine bath would have been moderately stiff but could be worked to a serviceable softness. It likely carried a faint, pleasant, vinegary scent, a far cry from the pungent odors of other tanning methods. More importantly, this practice created a beautiful overlap of crafts. In many communities, the same individuals or families who mastered the art of tapping palms and guiding fermentation might also be the leatherworkers. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a synergy of knowledge, understanding the precise point of fermentation, knowing how a brew tasted or smelled when it was just acidic enough for tanning rather than drinking. This was a specialized sensory skill. One can envision a workshop where the tools of both trades sat side by side, clay pots for collecting sap hanging near scrapers and stretching frames. The resulting leather was woven into the fabric of daily life. It was cut into sturdy straps for carrying loads, fashioned into durable bags for storing grain or market goods, and used for functional items like drum heads or protective covers. Its very existence speaks to a philosophy of abundance where the solution to a technical challenge like preservation was not imported, but drawn from the most generous and iconic plant in the landscape. The palm tree provided shelter, food, drink, and finally, through the alchemy of fermentation and human insight, the very means to clothe and equip a society. The palm tree's fermented gift was a celebration of life, but another method drew from a far more primal source, the very essence of life itself. Blood tanning is a practice that blurs the line between craft and sacrament. In cultures from ancient Scandinavia to the plains of Africa, the blood of the slaughtered animal was not simply washed away. It was a sacred ingredient, a final, potent offering from the creature to its own skin. After a hunt or a ritual sacrifice, the fresh, still warm blood would be carefully collected in a vessel. The tanner would then work this thick, iron-rich liquid thoroughly into the scraped hide, often while it was still damp and receptive. On a practical level, the blood acted as a kind of organic filler. The proteins and albumins within it coated the leather's fibers, adding substance and body, making the finished material thicker and more robust. The iron content provided a degree of preservation, as the metallic ions could inhibit bacterial growth, and it permanently stained the leather a deep, rich reddish brown, the color of rust and earth. But to view this only as a technical step is to miss its profound significance. This was often a ceremonial act, the closing of a spiritual loop. In a sacrificial context where every part of the animal was offered to the gods or ancestors, using its blood to preserve its own skin was the ultimate act of respect and completeness. Nothing was wasted, and the animal's spirit was seen as wholly integrated into the object being made. The leather that emerged from this ritual was therefore considered charged with power. It was not for everyday use. This was the material for objects of deep importance. Across continents, blood-tanned leather was chosen for the heads of sacred drums. The logic was resonant. The spirit of the animal, captured in its blood and skin, would give voice to the drum, making its sound more potent, more connected to the unseen world. It was used in ceremonial armor, where a warrior might seek the strength and courage of a bull or a stag by wearing its essence into battle. Shields could be hardened and painted with blood mixtures believed to carry protective magic. Even ritual masks or regalia for shamans might incorporate this process, linking the wearer directly to the animal's life force. As a tanning method, blood was rarely used alone. It was typically part of a sequence, perhaps following a brain dressing or preceding a smoke treatment. The blood added its color and substance, while another agent provided the primary preservation. This layered approach speaks to a holistic understanding of materials, where each element, from brain to blood to smoke, contributed a different quality, physical and spiritual, to the final, transformed skin. The object became a layered story, a biography of the animal and the ritual of its transformation, written not in words but in chemistry and belief. The spiritual weight of blood-tanned leather speaks to a world where every substance held potential meaning. But what if the tanner's most potent tool was not an animal product or a plant extract, but a living, breathing entity? This brings us to the 19th method, a shadowy and controversial technique that sits at the very edge of historical evidence and modern speculation: kombucha and bacterial cellulose tanning. Scattered through old texts and obscure folklore are hints that some ancient craftsmen may have harnessed the power of symbiotic cultures, the same slimy, gelatinous mats we know today as kombucha mothers or vinegar plants. The theory is as strange as it is compelling. Imagine a tanner noticing that a hide left accidentally in a vat of fermenting sweet tea did not rot, but instead developed a strange leather-like coating. The kombucha culture, a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast, produces both acetic acid and a thick, rubbery mat of bacterial cellulose as it feeds. Both byproducts could theoretically interact with an animal skin. The acidic environment would preserve the hide in a manner similar to other sour ferments, while the cellulose mat itself, a pure microbial fabric, could physically bond to the skin's surface, creating a unique composite material, part animal hide, part microbial biofilm. This would not be tanning in any traditional sense, but a form of ancient biotechnology, a literal growing of a new protective layer onto the old. The evidence for this is hauntingly sparse, more whisper than record. It relies on interpreting ambiguous descriptions of slimy brews or gelatinous treatments in a handful of medieval alchemical or craft manuscripts from Europe and Asia. There is no definitive archaeological find of a 2,000-year-old kombucha tanned sandal, yet the possibility tantalizes modern experimental archaeologists and leather enthusiasts. Several have attempted to recreate the process, submerging scraps of hide in active kombucha ferments for weeks or months. The results are bizarre and variable. Sometimes the hide simply pickles in the acid, becoming preserved but stiff. In other experiments, a thin, translucent cellulose film does indeed adhere to the skin's surface, creating a material that feels alien, like a tough, flexible laminate. These modern experiments ask a profound question: did ancient tanners, through sheer accident and observation, discover and cultivate specific microbial cultures centuries before we had the language of microbiology? Did they learn to guide a ferment not just for drink but for craft? If so, it represents a pinnacle of intuitive science, a partnership with invisible life to transform a visible one. This method, whether fully realized in antiquity or merely a path not fully taken, stretches our definition of the tanner's art to its breaking point, suggesting a world where the vat was not just a chemical bath but a living, breathing ecosystem. That microbial partnership stretches our very idea of a tannery, but in the mist-shrouded forests of the Pacific Northwest, the trees themselves offered a more tangible and fragrant chemistry. Here, towering red cedars were not just timber, they were sacred beings, providers of everything from canoes to clothing to, crucially, the means to preserve leather. For the Coast Salish and other indigenous peoples of this lush, rainy world, the inner bark of the red cedar, combined with the crushed berries of the juniper, created a tanning method perfectly adapted to their environment. The process began with deep respect. Cedar bark was harvested with ceremony, often from a living tree in a way that allowed it to heal, acknowledging its gift. This fibrous, aromatic inner bark was then pounded or shredded to release its potent compounds. Juniper berries, tart and ricinus, were gathered and crushed. Together, these materials held a powerful synergy. The cedar bark contained mild tannins and, more importantly, aromatic oils like thujone, natural insecticides and preservatives. The juniper berries contributed their sharp acidity. A tanner would prepare a pit, lining it with these fragrant materials, layering a prepared deer or elk hide within, and covering it all with more bark and earth. Alternatively, they might boil the ingredients to create a rich, smoky, scented decoction for soaking. For weeks, the hide would rest in this earthy, perfumed tomb, slowly absorbing the preservatives and the very scent of the forest. The leather that emerged was something special. It carried the warm, clean, unmistakable fragrance of cedar and juniper for years, a natural perfume that repelled moths and insects, a critical advantage in a damp climate where mold and pests were a constant threat. The tannins and acids imparted a soft, reddish-brown color, and the leather itself was supple and strong. Ethnographic records from early encounters describe the beautiful work produced, often used for ceremonial regalia, pouches for storing valuable dentalium shell money, and protective wrappings for tools. But this was more than a technical recipe. Cedar was, and is, understood as a living relative, a generous ancestor. Using its bark to transform a hide was an act of weaving relationships, connecting the spirit of the forest with the spirit of the animal to create an object of both utility and beauty. The fragrant leather was a testament to that relationship, a material that did not just keep the rain out, but carried the memory of the misty woods and the respectful hands that made it within its very fibers. The fragrant cedar forests of the Pacific Northwest created a leather that carried the very scent of the trees, but halfway across the world, in the sun-drenched landscapes of the Indian subcontinent, tanners discovered a different kind of botanical treasure, one that grew not on towering trunks but on humble, fruit-bearing trees. Here, the art of leather preservation was deeply intertwined with the ancient science of life itself, Ayurveda. For centuries, perhaps millennia, before the oak bark pits of Europe became an industry, Indian craftsmen were using the dried, wrinkled fruit of the myrobalan tree. This unassuming nut, known as Terminalia chebula, was a cornerstone of Ayurvedic pharmacy, revered for its balancing and healing properties. Tanners, observing its potent astringency, realized it held another power. They would harvest these fruits, crush them into a coarse powder, and mix them into tanning pits. The myrobalan nut is astonishingly rich in condensed tannins, even more so than many European barks. When a prepared goatskin or sheepskin was submerged in this fruity brew, it underwent a transformation that was both gentle and profound. The tannins penetrated evenly, creating a leather that was uniquely soft, flexible, and strong, with a fine, tight grain and a beautiful pale buff color that took dye exceptionally well. But myrobalan was just the beginning of a vast fruity arsenal. Pomegranates, after their juicy seeds were enjoyed, offered their bitter, tannin-rich rinds to the tanner's vat. The dried pods of the babul acacia tree, another common sight, were also gathered and boiled. This was a tanning ecology of zero waste, where the byproduct of one harvest became the essential material of another craft. The sophistication of Indian leatherworking became legendary. Through intricate trade networks, these fruit-tanned hides traveled west, reaching the bustling markets of the Middle East and North Africa. There, in centers like Marrakesh, Moroccan artisans would further process and tool the leather, creating the world-famous Morocco leather that became a byword for luxury in Europe. This leather was not for saddles or boots, it was for the most refined objects of civilization. Its superb flexibility and smooth surface made it the absolute premium material for bookbinding. The finest volumes in the libraries of kings and popes, the gilt-tooled covers of Renaissance Bibles and scientific treatises, were often sheathed in genuine Morocco leather. It was crafted into exquisite wallets, delicate gloves, and ornate wall coverings for palaces. The journey from an Ayurvedic fruit in an Indian tannery to the cover of a priceless book in a European library is a story of global craftsmanship, where botanical knowledge from one culture became the foundation for an art form treasured by another. It reveals a truth often forgotten in the industrial age, that some of the most enduring luxuries were born not from force, but from a deep understanding of the gentle, potent chemistry hidden within a simple piece of fruit. That journey from the Ayurvedic groves to the Royal Library reveals a world of botanical luxury, but at the very top of our planet, where no trees grow and the only green is the eerie glow of the aurora, the art of leather was a matter of pure, unadorned survival. Here, the tanner's ingredients were hauled from the frozen sea. For the Inuit and other Arctic peoples, the oil and blubber of seals, whales, and seabirds were not just food and fuel, they were the essential chemistry for creating a second skin against the ice. The process began in the most intimate way possible, with human teeth. After a seal was harvested, a woman would meticulously scrape the hide clean. Then she would take a section and chew it, not as a casual act, but as a deliberate, tiring technique. Her teeth and the enzymes in her saliva worked the stiff fibers, softening a small area at a time, a method born of necessity where every tool, even the body itself, was employed. Once pliable, the hide would undergo its greasy transformation. Rendered blubber, often intentionally allowed to become rancid to increase its acidity, or thick seabird oil, would be worked thoroughly into the skin. The rancidity was not a mistake, it was a calculated step, as the breakdown of the fats created fatty acids that helped to preserve the hide and break down remaining proteins. This oily paste was massaged in by hand, sometimes with a smooth stone, in a process that could last for days, ensuring every fiber was saturated. The extreme cold played a silent, crucial role. It acted as a natural refrigerator, dramatically slowing the bacterial decay that would ruin a hide in days in a temperate climate. This allowed for a longer, more deliberate processing time, a luxury granted by the very harshness of the environment. The result of this oily, physical alchemy was a leather of legendary performance. It was supremely waterproof, windproof, and could remain flexible in temperatures that would make other materials shatter. This was the material for the iconic kamak, the boot that made life on the ice possible. Sealskin kamaks, with their waterproof seams meticulously stitched by women using sinew thread, kept feet dry and functional while standing in freezing saltwater or on wet snow. Caribou skin, treated with similar oils, became the warm, breathable inner lining for parkas and anoraks, the outer shell often made from tougher seal or walrus hide. Every step of this craft was part of a profound, sustainable cycle. The seal provided meat for sustenance, blubber for light and heat and tanning, sinew for thread, and finally, its skin for the clothing that enabled the next hunt. Nothing was wasted because waste meant extinction. The hunter's success and the tanner's skill were two halves of a single, vital equation for survival. The garments they created were not fashion, they were architecture, mobile shelters that held a pocket of human warmth against the vast, indifferent cold. To wear an oil-tanned sealskin anorak was to carry the entire ecosystem of the hunt, transformed through knowledge and labor into a portable, life-giving embrace. That oily, physical labor of the Arctic was a complete cycle, but for the massive tanneries of the ancient world, the process had to be broken down into discrete, brutal steps. Before any hide could be transformed by tannins or oils, it had to be stripped bare, a process of controlled destruction that was as dangerous as it was essential. This is the world of lime and ash depilation, the harsh, alkaline gateway to almost every leather that followed. It was not tanning itself, but the necessary violence that made tanning possible. Imagine a fresh cowhide just arrived from the butcher. It is heavy with flesh, fat, and a thick coat of hair, all of which will rapidly rot. The tanner's first task is to remove all of it to reduce this messy, organic sheet down to its pure collagen canvas. For this, ancient craftsmen turned to one of the most caustic substances they could reliably produce. They would create a powerful lye by slaking quicklime with water to form calcium hydroxide, or by leaching water through wood ashes to extract potassium hydroxide. Both created a fiercely alkaline solution. The hide would be submerged in this pit, often for days or even weeks. The chemistry here is aggressive. The high pH causes the hide to swell dramatically, puffing up like a sponge. More critically, it attacks the keratin proteins that make up hair and the weaker proteins in the epidermal layer. It literally dissolves the glue that holds the hair root in its follicle. After the soak, the hide would be hauled out, dripping with the corrosive liquor. Using a blunt, two-handed tool called a beam knife, the tanner would then scrape the surface. If the timing was perfect, the hair and the thin outer skin would slide off in soggy, stinking clumps with surprising ease, revealing the smooth, blue-white grain layer beneath. The other side of the hide, caked with flesh and fat, would be scraped clean on a fleshing beam, the alkaline soak having loosened those tissues as well. But this was a dance on a razor's edge. Leave the hide in the lime pit too long, and the caustic solution would begin to attack the very collagen fibers the tanner sought to preserve. The hide could become irreparably weakened, gelatinous in spots or full of holes, a valuable commodity reduced to worthless pulp. The tanner judged this not by a clock, but by experience, by the feel of the hide against the knife and the look of the grain. Managing this process defined the landscape of ancient industry. Because of the overpowering stench of rotting organic matter and harsh chemicals, tanneries were always banished to the downstream edge of towns, away from residential areas. The workers themselves were often a class apart, their hands and clothes stained by the lime, their trade considered unclean by many societies, yet utterly indispensable. This step, for all its foulness, was an act of purification. It stripped away everything temporary and corruptible, leaving behind only the strong, fibrous matrix that could then be reborn as leather. It was a baptism by fire, or rather by lye, a necessary trial by chemistry that every hide had to survive before its true transformation could even begin. The harsh lime pit stripped the hide down to its essence, but in the gilded courts of ancient empires, the goal was not purification, but adornment of the most extravagant kind. Here, leather was not merely preserved, it was consecrated with the very breath of luxury. This is the world of saffron and spice infusions, where tanning became an act of perfumed alchemy reserved for the divine and the imperial. In the workshops of Persia, Byzantium, and the Mughal Empire, tanners worked with ingredients more valuable than gold by weight. They would create delicate infusions by steeping precious saffron threads, vibrant turmeric root, or fragrant sandalwood powder in warm oils or waters. These weren't crude pastes, they were precious elixirs. A prepared skin, perhaps of the softest kid goat, would be gently treated with these infusions, not in a foul pit, but in a shallow basin of aromatic liquid. The chemistry here was subtle but multi-layered. The spices, particularly turmeric and saffron, contained curcumin and crocin, compounds with mild antibacterial and antifungal properties that offered a gentle preservation. But their true power was in their pigment and their perfume. Saffron, the world's most expensive spice, gifted the leather a luminous, sun-gold hue, a color that seemed to hold light within it. Turmeric produced a rich, radiant yellow. Sandalwood did not dye so much as perfume, its warm, woody scent sinking into the fibers to last for decades. The leather that emerged was a sensory masterpiece. It was visually stunning, carrying colors that ordinary dyes could not replicate. It was fragrant, announcing the presence and status of its owner before they even entered a room. And it was imbued with a cultural and spiritual significance that transcended its material form. This was never leather for a common saddle or a workman's apron. This was the material for objects of supreme importance and display. In scriptoriums, it was carefully cut and tooled to become the cover for a sacred Quran or a lavishly illustrated gospel. Its golden color symbolizing divine light, and its scent meant to elevate the act of reading into a holy experience. For a Mughal emperor, slippers made from such leather would whisper with every step, leaving a trace of sandalwood in the air. In Renaissance Europe, the concept evolved into scented gloves, a must-have accessory for the aristocracy, where the perfume of the leather was as important as its fit. The demand for these materials created ripples across the globe. It tied the tanner's workshop in Isfahan to the saffron fields of Kashmir, and the bookbinder in Constantinople to the sandalwood forests of India. The spice routes, those legendary arteries of commerce, were not just carrying flavor for food, but the raw materials for an olfactory art form. To own an object made from spice-infused leather was to demonstrate a command over global trade, an appreciation for the most refined chemistry, and a desire to engage the world through all the senses. Status was no longer just visual, woven into gold thread or set in jewels. It was olfactory and tactile, embedded in the very smell and feel of one's possessions. It asked a profound question of luxury. Is the highest form of wealth the ability not just to own rare things, but to transform the functional into an experience for the soul? Saffron and spice were the perfumes of power, but the true power of the ancient tanner lay in a secret known only to the guild. Behind the high walls of their workshops, masters didn't follow a single recipe, they composed symphonies of chemistry. This final method isn't one technique, but the art of them all, the lost world of composite and secret guild methods. The leather that armored a Roman centurion, bound a Gutenberg Bible, or formed the glove of a Medici prince was almost never the product of a single vat. It was the result of a meticulously sequenced multi-stage alchemy, a recipe as guarded as state secrets. Imagine the process. A hide would first endure the harsh baptism of the lime pit to strip it bare. Then it might be transferred to a vat of fermenting barley or a paste of dog dung for the baiting stage to soften and refine its fibers. From there, it entered the long, slow dance with oak bark tannins, perhaps for many months. But that wasn't the end. The tanned leather might then be pulled from the bark liquor and worked with fish oil for water resistance or rubbed with brains for ultimate suppleness. Its final act could be a days-long smoke over applewood or peat moss, locking in the qualities and adding its signature scent. The exact sequence, the timing, the specific materials used at each juncture, these were the variables that defined a master's signature and a guild's monopoly. They were never written down, only passed from master to apprentice in the dim light of the workshop, a chain of trust and tradition. And when that chain broke, when plagues swept through cities or guilds were dissolved by decree, the knowledge vanished forever. We are left with ghosts in the chemistry. Modern scientists using tools like mass spectrometry can analyze fragments of ancient leather from bogs, tombs, and shipwrecks. They don't find a single chemical signature, they find a palimpsest. A piece of a medieval shoe might reveal traces of alum, oak tannins, and conifer resin. A scrap of a Viking belt could show markers for fish oil, birch smoke, and something unidentifiable, perhaps a local herb whose use died with the last craftsman who knew its property. Each of these complex profiles is a whisper of a lost formula, a unique combination of local resources and guarded technique aimed at producing leather with a very specific set of properties, flexibility here, rot resistance there, a particular color or scent. We can speculate, but we cannot truly recreate. What was the exact blend of 3 barks used by the Cordoba tanners to produce their legendary Cordovan leather, so dense it could be polished like stone? What fermented fruit mixture gave a particular African leather its legendary resistance to tropical insects? These questions may never have answers. The guild's wall of secrecy, so effective in life, became in death a wall between us and a complete understanding of their art. Their greatest achievement was also their final mystery, leaving us to admire the sublime results of a process we can only partially decode. A permanent testament to the price of perfection kept too close to the chest. From brain to bark, urine to alum, we have journeyed through 25 incredible ancient tanning methods. Each one stands as a profound testament to human ingenuity, a deep and intimate understanding of local ecology, and the relentless, universal pursuit of turning a perishable skin into a lasting resource. These were not just recipes, they were dialogues with the environment. A tanner on the steppe looked at a bowl of sour milk and saw a preservative. A craftsman in the forest saw a lichen-draped branch and saw a tanning vat waiting to be brewed. Every method was a localized answer to a global problem, a unique chemical signature drawn from the immediate world. These methods built empires. The bark-tanned leather of Europe shod the legions that marched under Roman eagles and bound the ledgers of medieval merchants. They clothed armies, from the fish oil-treated gear of Viking raiders to the sturdy harnesses of cavalry across continents. They preserved knowledge with the soft alum tawd covers protecting illuminated manuscripts and the fragrant spice-infused leather sheathing sacred texts. They enabled exploration as water-resistant sealskin kayaks and oil-tanned sails carried people across trackless oceans and frozen seas. Leather was the silent partner in every great human endeavor, the flexible, durable fabric of civilization itself. So the next time you hold a leather wallet, glance at a worn book spine, or pull on a pair of boots, pause for a moment, look beyond the object, see the ghost of an ancient craft. That material carries within it the echo of 1,000 different solutions, a mystery solved across the millennia in pits of oak bark, over smoldering fires, and in vats of surprising, potent brews. It represents a conversation between human need and natural abundance, a conversation that has never truly ended. Which of these 25 methods fascinated you the most? Was it the spiritual intimacy of brain tanning, the industrial scale of the bark pits, or the startling ingenuity of the anthill? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden chemistry of history, be sure to subscribe for more journeys into the world's greatest historical mysteries.